and good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thursday. This is Lex Gingerella from Recruiting Daily, reporting live for another educational webinar from our awesome pals at Olio. Yes, we're going to talk today about high volume hiring. As you can see here from our nice little title slide, we're going to talk about an awesome journey, and it's going to be pretty cool. So I'm excited for what we're diving into. Per usual, for those of you that may not have joined a webinar of ours before, a couple housekeeping tips. You are in listen-only mode, so using your GoToWebinar control panel is how you're going to ask questions and communicate with us. You can hear us, we cannot hear you. So using the control panel to ask questions is key. We are recording the webinar as well. So if there's anything that you missed or you're not sure about, no worries, because right after the webinar, we will be sending out a follow-up email to everyone with a copy of today's presentation, recording, and also a special offer from our friends at Olio. So be sure to stay tuned for that afterwards. And if you're following along online, please use the hashtag #RDaily, because I'll be keeping an eye out for that and answering questions there as well. For today's agenda, I'm going to introduce our experts. We're going to talk a little bit about one of our experts' journey at where she is an expert at Evercore. Get into the journey, talk about some high volume hiring, do some Q&A, and we do have some poll questions we're going to be putting to the audience today. So stay tuned for that, because we do want to hear from you guys as well. So without further ado, I'm passing it over to today's experts, Joanna Walker and William Tincup. And Joanna, I would like you to go ahead and get started and tell everybody a little about yourself.
Great, happy to. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to speak with everybody. So a little bit about me. I often tease that I'm sort of in that quote-unquote people business. I started out in outdoor education and moved into teaching and found my way into campus recruiting and experience recruiting about 8 years ago. And so right now, my role is to run our campus recruiting efforts at Evercore. And I've been here about 3.5 years. I primarily focus on our associates or MBA hires, and also was doing experience recruiting up until about 6 months ago. And I got to spearhead our ATS implementation. So it's been an exciting time here at Evercore.
That's a lot. That's actually really, really cool. And a lot of hats to wear, and a lot of failure points and success points. So fantastic. This is William Tincup. I'm extremely excited about the topic today because I came up, like a lot of people, I came up through both the grocery business and the retail business. And so when people talk about high volume, sometimes they use it synonymously with hourly hiring, and sometimes they just mean hiring at a velocity, at a pace. So Joanna is going to take us into her journey and take us into her world. So a couple things, just as Lex, and just to reiterate, webinars like this, it's all about the context and the story that comes out of Joanna, but it's also questions that you have, because you signed up for a reason, you're here for a reason, you're listening to a reason. Participate, whatever questions you have, just make sure you throw them in there so that Lex can go through them and then ask Joanna and myself. So without further ado, Joanna, tell us a little bit about Evercore.
Sure. Well, Evercore is a great place. I obviously love working here. It makes my job a lot easier because it is such a great place. But for those of you unfamiliar with who we are a independent investment bank based out of New York, but have offices globally. We work on some of the most important deals in the world. So some of the deals that have come out recently might be Amazon Whole Foods, Comcast Sky, Aetna, and CVS. And so one of the things that's unique about being an independent bank is that we do not lend money, which is very different from what's known as a bulge bracket. What's great about that is that we're able to provide strategic advice that's conflict-free and provides a unique perspective for our clients, which kind of speaks into our core values of being client-focused. And the second thing that makes us really different is our culture. Our founder, Roger Altman, has spent a lot of time focusing and making sure that this is a bank that cultivated really good work and really good people, and that even though we've had tremendous expansion over the last 20 years, it's still very much his focus, and therefore that trickle-down effect that's always helpful, it just sort of breeds into our recruiting and how we pick the right people to join us. So we're kind of 1,600 people strong globally, and I think the most fun thing about this job is that I get to work with very junior people who are coming out of college and out of MBA and starting their career, and I'm selling a really good product to them. That's what recruiters do. So I feel really comfortable that they're going to come to a place where they're going to be taught by the most senior bankers, have mentorship, and just have mutual respect in the type of work that they're going to be learning over their time here at Evercore. And so that's really exciting. And I'm, excited about our overall recruiting process here.
So the types, when we say high volume, the types of high volume hires that you're making, give the audience an idea of like what type of titles are we talking about and what types of people are we talking about?
Sure. So the majority of our recruiting comes from the investment banking side, I would say. And so those are typically people who are excited to be an investment banker, which sounds silly, but sometimes that's not what everybody wants to do when they come out of college. So that's a part of what we need to message about why it's a great place to kind of build a foundation just when it's your qualitative and quantitative skills. And where that high volume hiring comes from is really at the undergrad and MBA levels. And that's
Right.
what's known as an analyst or an associate. And those are the two most junior levels here. And the hope is that they can grow and move up the levels as long as they want to stay here. Typical to investment banking, the analysts are a 2-year program.
Right.
And then the associates, fingers crossed, they're lifers here, but we recognize that banking isn't for everybody, and sometimes they want to go do other things. And I will say in the last year or 2 years, our experienced hiring has accelerated significantly because we were a smaller bank. We really had to rely on recruiting from the outside to kind of build out across some of the white space we were experiencing in certain industries. And so we've sort of had a high volume on both the campus side and the experience side, but the campus side is probably the more high volume plus the short time period that many people might experience.
So two questions on type of numbers we're looking at. Don't want to do anything proprietary, of course, but just give the audience an idea of like how many hires in 2019 do you think you'll have to make?
So I like to divide them out in the campus perspective. I will say
Sure.
in 2018, we onboarded in the summer over 4 different classes that were, 200 plus people
Right.
across just the US. That's not even globally. And so you can probably tack on another 50 or so. And then from a experienced, we've got, anywhere between 75 and 100 people that were coming in this year. So
Wow.
it's hard to tell with the market next year to anticipate the hires, but I think the goal would be kind of around the same. Even I think our senior managers would be happy if it was a little bit lower than that from that perspective.
Just give them a breather.
Exactly.
Two follow-up school questions. Particular schools that are better at the types of people that you're looking for, and second, your biggest pet peeve at the college recruiting game, if you will.
Oh, I feel like the pet peeves might even be an easier answer. I think there are great schools across the country. I think, I'd hate to point out too many because I think you can get a great education anywhere.
Sure.
But it is definitely harder at certain schools to get access to some of the big companies just, because there are fewer alumni from there. But, if you are a diehard finance person, many people come from Penn and NYU, but we find great students from all kinds of schools, whether it's state schools, like University of Texas is a place we go. But we really have great people in general, and so we try and kind of have this targeted effort and a non-core or non-targeted effort. So we have students from all over the U.S. and including from some of the Canadian schools, and so it's really
cool.
more about it's very cool, and I think what's nice is it's a great way to just have diversity of thought and perspective and education.
Yeah. It's funny when I did my MBA in researching different schools, I didn't know Dartmouth was a pipeline to Wall Street. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had associated in my mind completely differently. And then as I was doing my research, I'm like, wow, like 90% of the students go to Wall Street. I'm like, yeah, that's not me. that's, that's a bad experience for me. And
I think we have our first question from the audience.
oh, well, bring it. Let's do
Bring it
that.
on. Joanna,
I,
Elaney from our audience is asking, out of those 200 plus roles that you said you have to fill, how many applications do you receive for them?
oh, great question.
Great question. Well, and that speaks a little bit to us finally having an applicant tracking system that could accurately tell us these things, which we were lacking. But, from the analyst perspective, you can imagine how many students are just really excited about getting a job out of college. And so we can get upwards for just the summer internship program, which is about 85 to 100 students, upwards to 3,500 to 4,000 applications. And then, the next class could be another of the same amount. So the majority of our hiring really comes in the summertime. So that's really where we'll see the applicants. But that's why having a really good ATS is so key to making sure that we can do our job well.
That's nice. A lot of folks not unfamiliar with the MBA summer internship program. When I went through 128 years ago, the largest all internships were paid, so we didn't know nobody did unpaid internships back then. But the largest one was Progressive Insurance, and they paid $7,000 a month, $21,000.
Wow.
So things have. I'm assuming things have changed. I don't know that
Yeah.
to be true. But what is it? What is it like? Tell the audience what it's like dealing with MBAs and their egos and desires, and what is a typical internship look like for y'all?
Sure. I mean, I have such a soft spot for the MBAs, but probably it's because I've been ingrained with them for the last 4 or 5 years. Um, they are a great set of people that are just trying to find their next career. As we know, 90 to 95% of them are switching, and they're just trying to
Yep.
find what works for them. And so what we really try and do is provide them that opportunity over 10 weeks to understand what banking is. We'd hate for anybody to walk out of here and say, I literally don't know what banking is. That would be terrible.
Yeah.
So, we really try and provide everything from, and we run, what I should say in New York is I run a generalist program. So that gives them the opportunity to work across a couple of different industries. So
That's
they
nice.
might be interested, like if you're interested in tech and healthcare, why not try both?
Right.
And there are places, we do have groups that you go into specifically, but I think that's a nice advantage. And with the summer staff fair, making sure you get all of those proper staffings, the things that I try and add on to are lunch and learns. We have a mentor study program where you really get access to more people in the firm. And what we always like to tease about is we challenge anybody else on the street to say that they have better events than we do. We have some really fun social events.
Okay. Wait a minute. So I might apply. A pressure that you either you put on yourself or societal pressure, executive pressure, etc. Tell us a little bit about diversity. Just like what's your bit, like what's your approach? How do you kind of go about it?
Sure. And as we know, that's such a hot topic in any industry today. And, one of the things that's so important to making sure that diversity works at your firm is to have the senior management buy-in. And really, it needs to be coming from them. And we're very lucky here at Evercore that is so much the case. I have lots of conversations with senior managers and our CEO and our COO who really want to make sure that we're getting the best class that's also the most diverse class. And, we've implemented certain things, and I think being a smaller firm that's growing, we still have a way to go on some of it. But I think the great thing about that is that anybody who joins us now gets to be a part of growing out the internal parts of diversity, which is really great. And from the recruiting side, some of the things that we've done is I've been partnering with diversity groups that help me make sure that I get access to candidates that I wouldn't necessarily get to do. I mean, our campus recruiting team here is 3 people, and you can imagine with a smaller firm, it's just harder to get to every school. So
Right.
we want to make sure we're hitting all the schools to get all the top students. And some of those partners have been so fantastic in making sure that they help out to share our events and make sure that students kind of know who we are, just kind of from that branding perspective. And so we've been offering several different diversity events on top of a diversity fellowship, and that's much more at the MBA level.
Right.
Just to, and I want to emphasize that anyone is eligible to apply to this diversity fellowship, because anyone who adds commitment to diversity, whether they consider themselves a diverse person, is really important. So we make sure that when we're having conversations through our many events, we're getting to know people and kind of understanding what they're doing outside of the classroom. You know, are you a leader? Are you a team member? Who are you working with? Are you volunteering? Are you, you know, where did you come from? What's your story? And I think those are some really important things in order to get them in the process. And I think on the other side, it's making sure that when I have interviewers and I have people who are coming to my events from the Evercore side, they are focused on making sure we get the best people and are open to, you know, anyone that they speak to, which is really key.
Yeah, and it's a change for us. I mean, we're all kind of it's great. You have an a very enlightened perspective on diversity, and that's how we're going to make strides. Is that we all kind of start together, start kind of moving the ball and going. You know what? We don't have to all recruit from Penn. I mean, that's cool. Penn's great, actually, probably one of the best quant schools in the world. But we don't have to that doesn't have to be the only place we all look. There's so many other, Lewis and Clark, you know, Southwestern and down there in Round Rock, Texas, or Georgetown, Texas, you know, places like that. But anyhow, I didn't want to take you off your journey. I just wanted to piggyback and ask you on both sides of the paid and the experience that they're going to have and diversity. So bring us back to your journey. And thanks for the question, by the way, from the audience. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that was great. And that's an important question to ask, is how many people are we actually dealing with? And that honestly, back to the question, is what drove me to say we have a serious technology problem here at Evercore. You know, when you're growing as quickly as you do, you sort of, the infrastructure sort of falls on the wayside until somebody says, we really need to fix this. And for the people that I work with here, they know very much so that I love processes and I love creating processes, breaking them down. I just like to be extremely efficient. You know, someone once said, let's work smarter, not harder. And that's absolutely how I try and operate. And finding the right applicant tracking system was like the main thing. When I walked in the door, I was like, what do you mean we don't really have something that's efficient for us? And when you're getting 3,500 or 4,000 applicants just for one summer analyst job, that's a lot of administration on our side, which nobody likes to do. And it means that you have to become extremely diligent with that master tracking and reporting that tools that you're dealing with, i.e. Excel. Which I've learned a lot about doing pivot tables and all that fun stuff, but I much prefer to have a system that will do it for me. So, you know, our journey when it comes to campus recruiting, which when I started here 3.5 years ago, really was the majority of recruiting that was happening here. And since then, the experienced hiring has very much picked up. I really needed something that was going to focus on that campus recruiting side, but also had the capability for experienced hiring. So, you know, that meant that we explored lots of different kinds of platforms that are out there. And unfortunately, we just didn't find a lot that focused on campus. And the reason why campus to me is so important is because they also have that events management system. So, you know, I wanted to be able to go to campus and capture who attended my presentation at University of Michigan or, you know, went to our case study at Chicago booth. And instead of having like a paper sign-in sheet from years ago, we wanted to be a little bit more technologically advanced, especially since we're trying to attract some students who have always had technology in their hands, want to make it easy for them. And so I was looking for something that had that event management piece and had bulk resume functionality. It is amazing to me that there are systems out there that won't allow me to bulk resumes together. That's one of my big pet peeves out there. And, we wanted some filtering options. What if I want to look at only certain schools or certain GPAs, or what if I need them to be a certain class level? And I think one of the other things that we were finding with some of the technology is if we needed help, it was sort of going into a black hole. Like nobody has time to go look in the help function to figure out how to do something very minute.
Yeah, and most of the time they're not going to look, even if it's there, and even if it would help them, they still wouldn't look.
Right.
Just cause. When you first came in, what did you feel like chicken and egg type thing? What did you feel like you had to focus on first? Was it process or technology?
Well, I will say I was very lucky. I walked into Evercore that had a very good recruiting reputation and process in place, but it was very people focused. And that speaks back to our culture and how everybody likes to be involved and likes to teach and has a real commitment into our junior people. So that part was great. I think the admin and processing back end part was a space that needed a little bit more help, and especially because our numbers were doubling, if not tripling, over the last 3 years of what our summer programs used to look like. You can imagine I can't just rely on a couple of people to give me some resumes. I mean, I needed both the technology and the processes to work together so that it was sort of seamless on that candidate side. Nobody wants their candidate to be confused or not sure what's going on. I mean, and I think that was where I saw a little bit of placement that needed some help.
Right.
And I don't know if it really was one or the other. I mean, like to your point, the chicken and the egg, I think it was sort of both of them colliding.
Yeah, I can see that. Let's, Lex, if you don't mind, let's put the first poll question up, and let's see what the audience thinks. Okay. What is your biggest pain point regarding high volume hiring technology? Integration into current tech stack, finding tech that actually works, having to learn new tech, price, budget. And so if y'all don't mind, please vote with the election. Vote. And we'll let that go on the backside while Joanna's telling us a little bit more about her journey.
Sure. Well, I have to say it came to a head, and I just decided the technology was what was going to win after we were colliding, because once we had the technology, I figured our process would improve.
And had you reviewed technology? Did you have like a double secret process, or did you kind of use something that you had done before, or how did you knew you needed something other than Excel?
Yeah. I had been in this campus space for a while before I joined Evercore, and had attended a couple of events that Olio, which at the time was WCN, for those of you that might recognize both those names. And they host a couple of events a year that just bring recruiters together to just talk about recruiting and pain points and things like that. And with that, I got introduced to their technology and realized this is so what we need. But in order to be smart about getting technology that's right for the whole firm, you really need to go out in the world and assess all kinds of ATSs that are out there, just to make sure that I was getting the right technology for us. I mean, they were really the only ones I'd ever spoken to. So in order to do my due diligence, I went out in the world with our IT guys and had many conversations, spoke with clients of those that had hired several of these technologies, and ultimately came back in a full circle, and Olio won out.
Okay. So, and thanks for mentioning that WCN recently rebranded and is now known as Olio, they did a wonderful job rebranding. But it's always interesting when you change your names, which, you used to be known as, and now you are known as. So everyone that formerly knew WCN, get to know Olio. All right, back to your journey.
Yeah. And the people over at Olio are similar culture, I feel like, to Evercore. So that just made it even easier in terms of our conversations about what we needed. Um, I keep saying we're a small firm, but I really mean it. And I think it's because many of the larger firms have so many different teams that will sort of take out the implementation part away from the recruiter, which could have been really nice. But at the end of the day, it sort of ended up in my lap, and I spearheaded it, so that was the right choice. And we did work with some IT people and internally, and together worked with WCN to customize it for ourselves, get ourselves trained up. And from that, we're slowly working on our process. And so, our events management system has been so great for the MBAs this fall. I feel so fancy walking around with my iPads, getting everybody to sign in, and the students think it's great. And at the same time that we were working with Olio, and I apologize if I go back and forth between WCN and Olio, it's sort of hard to remember. We were redoing our website, so I was doing a lot of that, and to make sure that it sort of matched up and worked with what we could post through the Olio portal. And that actually, I think, worked out well, although it didn't feel like that at the time. It was a bit of a pain point. I think everything matched up well that way, whereas if you already had like an extremely established website, it might have been more work on the site for that students get sent to from that landing page per se. And I think we were really lucky that was happening all at the same time. So that's been wonderful for our journey. And I would say we're still a work in progress. I mean, it's not over yet. I mean, we still have a couple of things that we can work with on Olio, and a lot of it is on our side. We have some capabilities with them that I would love to integrate, and that's more just getting approval from senior people. I think it's also me spending time to focus on it. And I think what's been super helpful all along is that they've been there for every question I have. I've been able to build relationships with many of the people that work there just over the years of going to these recruiting events. And that's why I felt so comfortable going there, because they deal with me when I have annoying questions.
Well, they're not annoying because they're probably getting the question from other folks, but whatever questions you have, it's informing them of some things that they probably need to make clear somewhere else. When you said that you were redoing your website, were you focused most on the main website or the careers portion of the website?
It was a total overhaul of the whole thing, which was desperately needed, I will say. So it's turned out well.
Okay. That can usually.
Poll results?
Yeah. Come on, bring poll results on up.
Awesome.
Wow.
Oh, that's fantastic. First of all, finding tech that actually works is the winner by far. I mean, the rest of them don't even total it. That's amazing.
And I love that line too. That actually works.
Actually works. Well, and how do you know if it's going to work for you until you use it? You know what I mean? Like on some level.
I mean, it's asking a lot of really hard questions, and I will say I ask lots of hard questions until I honestly get the answer I really like.
Well, that's
so
job.
True.
Yeah, that's the job. I tell people all the time, it's the job of the customer to be demanding. That's their job.
Right.
If they're not being demanding, then they're not doing their job. It's your job to then kind of make sure to box that in. If it goes too far, let them know it goes too far. But it's their job to be demanding and ask tough questions. I mean, that's when you're buying technology, you don't know what you don't know. So you've got to ask a lot. You got to ask a lot of questions like, can it do this and can it do that? And will I do this and will it do that? That was a great.
What I found pretty interesting when I was watching the results come in behind the scenes was that integration into current tech stack and finding tech that actually works was neck and neck up until like the last few seconds. And then it was like almost everybody was like, nah, we are finding tech that works. It was really interesting to watch because everybody was really on the same page, and then they just realized no. So it was really interesting.
What I like out of this poll question is that budget isn't first.
Yeah.
because no one wins, because if any of our technologies that we care about are become kind of commoditized and price is the only thing that you're looking at, then that's bad for everybody. It's bad for vendors, practitioners, and the like. The training thing, the purple, the 5%, that's very interesting, but it's really kind of a post-sale question because it's how do you get adoption? How do you get people to use the technology? That all comes down to training. Like you might not like it on the front end. It might be a pain point on, like, oh, we're doing a demo and looking and seeing a bunch of new stuff, bells and whistles that you're unaccustomed to. But the deep irony of once you've bought the software, it all comes down to training.
Right.
So.
And keep using it, otherwise you forget.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Got to use it. Got to get consumption. Oh, that's fantastic. All right.
Sorry, I just want to make a comment on something. Can you put that poll back up?
Yeah, sure.
The finding tech that actually works it's really interesting how much I found by going across all kinds of different kinds of platforms, and I'm speaking to my friends all over the street in lots of different industries, just not financial services, where they kind of get forced into getting technology that doesn't work for them. And
That's right.
that's so frustrating because when you're the recruiter and you're using it every day, you really should have a voice. You should be at the table and saying, this doesn't work for this team. Like, just because you have a relationship because maybe you use other parts of this company's technology, or someone knows someone, or the price is right, or whatever it is, doesn't, that's so frustrating. That's not going to help the recruiting process. And,
No.
we just all have to be at the table pounding our hands.
Well, there's two things that I tell. First of all the talent acquisition leaders that are listening know this. It's the hardest job in HR, hands down. Like, you can talk to people in Benny's and payroll and comp and succession and all across the way. They all have challenges. They're all difficult in their own ways. But finding talent, marketing the talent, recruiting the talent, interviewing the talent, bringing the talent on board, doing all that stuff, it's the hardest job in HR. And to be forced, you used a great word, to use inferior technology to find out any way you want to. It's almost like being a chef and then saying, okay, well, we're just going to drop off some stuff on the back and, hopefully you can make something out of it. Like,
yeah, good luck.
Good luck. So I think you're right. You said for me, you use the appropriate words of pounding on the table. And I've actually seen talent leaders now get to the point where no, I'm not going to accept that. If you want me to leave, this is a surefire way of getting me to leave.
Yeah,
Let me pick
absolutely.
my own technology. I know what's best. You know what's best for you, operations person, finance person, HR person. But I know what's best for me and what I'm doing. This is what I need. And if you want me to leave, okay, I'll leave. But I'm not going to be forced to use a spoon to dig a ditch. That's just not going to work. So I'm glad you went back there. That was great. So now we're on to your processes.
Well, I'm trying to think what's the best way to start. I mean, again, it's so interesting where I work. The people really sort of make my process so much easier. I was having worked other places. I think a lot of recruiters can commiserate with me where you're just constantly pulling people, and that's not to say I have it perfected for the interviews. I mean, when you're walking the floors, everybody knows you're coming and they hide. Nobody wants to get signed up for super days or interviews or something that might take them away from their work. So that process I'm still working on. And obviously that's a part of just getting to know people in the firm who will help you out when you're really in a jam. But, our campus processes are really dictated a lot by just kind of the calendar year and by the schools. Although I will say the analyst recruiting is moving up earlier and earlier, and it's so painful that even this week we heard a school was moving up to January of their sophomore year for an internship that was going to be, 16 months later. So we're hoping that that's not actually going to be the case, and we'll move that back because that really does change your strategy. How do you make sure
Yeah.
you get to know all of these students? I mean, we're hiring somebody not just for the summer, but for really 2, 3, 4 years. And they're young. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do my sophomore year in college. Barely
I
knew what I wanted
still,
to do.
yeah, it's a daily struggle. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
We have
So,
a sorry, guys. I was just going to say we do have another question from the audience. It's actually
Oh,
about students.
bring
great.
it. This is great.
So, Joanna, do the students have any type of interaction with the technology that you're using, or is it only your recruiters? And if so, if the students do have access, how do they react to it?
Great
Sure.
question.
So there are a couple ways that they interact with the technology. So if we are hosting events at certain schools, we post them. And so we'll either ask them to apply online, or I might send out an email with a link, and then they quote unquote register for the event. That's the first way that they'll see something. And then when we're at the event, I have iPads or tablets, whatever you need, where the students check in digitally through a website. So they kind of just search for their name, click register in. So it's very easy and seamless. I will say they think it's pretty cool. I also think it's cool. So I think that experience goes over really well. And then really the other times that they are experiencing our technology is the landing page, where they might be filtering for the types of jobs that they're looking for, events, and then actually applying for the job. I haven't had too much negative feedback in terms of the applicants just applying. There's always a couple questions here and there, but it's like sort of one-off situations. It's not been a huge amount of people with the same question, which is helpful, because the minute that comes up, you start to realize there's a problem with either your application or a question or things
That's right.
like that.
So the
And
candidates, go ahead, finish your thought.
And then the last thing, and I did say two, but it actually is three things. The last way that they have been interacting with us, and again, this can be increased over time, is when they sign up for interviews with us. And that to me is the coolest function. So they get a link, and then they can essentially pick the timing that they want that we've allocated. So maybe we say Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 in 2-hour increments. This is what we have available. They will then click through and get to just sign up. So it's much easier from the student's perspective, because I think, they're so anxious and they're so worried they're going to do something wrong. And they're also managing so many different other processes with other, banks in our case, that they want to make sure they can kind of do the back-to-back super days and things like that. So I think having a full view of where they can where they can super day is really helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're both trying to be memorable. They're talking to 20 banks, and they're trying to be memorable to 20 banks, and
Right.
y'all are trying to be memorable to the 1,000 candidates that you talk to. So you're both trying to be memorable. But it sounds like you've got a wonderful candidate experience set up for them. So kudos to you, because that doesn't work everywhere. So yeah, I know you have on the slide metrics. What do you judge yourself on? And then if we fast forward too much, we'll go back. But what do you judge yourself on, and what are you held to by
Sure.
others?
So we have certain points that we offer metrics to more senior people throughout the year. In particular, that's focused on the associate side. So those are the MBAs, just because they typically tend to spend more, a longer amount of their career here, if not the rest of their career. And we're focusing on lots of kinds of things. I mean, it's an overall ROI at each of the schools we do go to, and we want to make sure everybody is accountable. And when I say everybody, I mean our captains who who are partners here, all the way to some of the junior people that are spearheading the events with me, and all the efforts. And so we kind of cut the data many different ways. It might be across schools, might be across where they ended up in different offices around the U.S. We do look at different diversity initiatives in terms of underrepresented minorities. We want to have a very diverse class. And so while we do have a targeted effort at a certain amount of schools, we also have smaller efforts across many other schools. And the reason is to help make sure that we get access to top students at all of these kinds of schools that that we maybe wouldn't have been able to do with smaller efforts. So those are some of the metrics that we're really held to. We're less so on the budget side, but more so on who we're getting. One of the things that we do offer out to our senior managers is a fun facts page. And before they start in the summer, our COO reads them out to all of our partners during a meeting. And so he might say, like, some of the fun things that people were in their careers before they went to MBA school. For example, we had someone who was an assistant winemaker who's now a banker. I mean, got a great, like, wow, that's cool
Yes.
reaction.
Now he's a professional wine drinker.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she is, and we run some wine events here. It's lovely. But the fun facts page, I think, is also helpful. I mean, we might point out this is how many vets we've hired, which is important to many people
cool.
here. And yeah, and how many people might have been in other parts of financial services. What's like the most unique thing, hence the winemaker. We also had somebody who was an art historian at the Met. And then maybe some of the awards or like cool things that people have done. And so that's a nice metric per se that we provide to kind of give a view of what the class looks like.
Do you look at conversions of, offers to acceptance, and then, normally, and if they do an internship and things go, rather well, you want them. Do y'all make offers at the end of the internship for the next year, et cetera? I guess what I'm asking is, do y'all as a Texas colloquialism, you might not be familiar with this, but anyhow, do y'all look at those conversions at all, and does it matter, I guess?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
And that was one thing I didn't answer, so thanks for pointing that out.
Nice.
Yield is absolutely important to us. And so our goal is to give out offers on the last day of the internship.
Yeah.
And so
we used to call that, I might be telling you too much, but we used to call that thin letter, thick letter.
Oh, well, it's our sheets are 2 pages, so it's deceiving, I guess. But what's, we get to have a conversation with them and kind of let them know how the summer went and give them their offer. And the hope is that they'll accept, if not right away, but certainly take their time and have conversations with parents and family members that are important.
Yep.
And so from there, our conversions are very important to us. We want to make sure that, most of the class accepts. We don't overhire in the summer, which I think is a key element to us because I hire as many as I need the following year. So the hope is that from a full-time perspective, you aren't hiring as many people, which is important, which is obviously the point of the internship. So we have very, very high yields. And usually when people don't come back, it's because banking is just not for them. And that's totally fine.
Great time to learn that. Great time to learn that.
Yeah.
Lex, if you don't mind, let's do the second poll. And while we pull up the poll, I've got 2 questions for Joanna. So let's see here. With high volume hiring, what's most important? How fast you hire, which is speed, how cheaply you hire, price, and how great the hire is, quality. So it'll be very interesting to see. Please vote. Please, double please vote. The 2 questions while they're doing that, Joanna. One is, have you pushed yourself, or have you been pushed into doing more text recruiting via text?
No, I've actually have not had to do that. It's not been my experience.
Okay. Good. Yeah, it might be by industry. Might be just one of those things that certain groups of people like, but there's a interesting movement out there that candidates under a certain age or whatever just prefer to interact with recruiters not via fax, email, or voicemail or phone, but by text. So there's some put on your radar for things that might be down the road for you. Second question is, do y'all still do sign-on bonuses? You don't have to tell me how much or anything if you do. Just is it still a thing? Because it was a thing when I went through. And it was a thing that we all kind of measured each other on.
Yeah.
but but it was a thing then. Is it still a thing?
Yeah, it's a stock standard thing in investment banking. It's not just us. It's kind of, across the board. We're all pretty much around the same comp packages.
Okay.
Especially coming out of undergrad. So It's a great way to get people to sign a little bit earlier. We do offer an early incentive, but
Yeah.
many of, we didn't come up with that concept. Many people do
No,
that.
no. That's been around 300 years.
Right.
So yeah, but that's interesting. That's interesting. So it's still a thing, and that makes sense, especially for Wall Street. All right, let's go back to the presentation because I know there was other things. Did you have anything else on this one, or did you want to go to the next slide?
No, we can go to the next slide.
Hey guys, before we jump into this, it looks like everybody was pretty darn sure about their answers because they voted and then they stopped. So do you want to jump into the results before we go on?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good.
Quality of hire. God, that played out exactly like I'd love it to play out. Quality of
That's
hire.
right.
Like that
Quality
is
over
perfect.
quantity.
Well, you said that, right? So
Yeah.
you've got quality, then speed, and then cheaply is last. So you'll spend a little bit more money, but you want it to go a little bit faster. But at the end of the day, you want it to be a quality individual, somebody that's driven, have the same values, things like that, competence, cultural fit, etc. That's great. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank the audience. That's fantastic.
As the results were coming in too, we actually held pretty steady at 100% of people had at first selected how great the hire is, and then about 30 seconds in, everybody was like, maybe not. And so they changed a little bit, but holding steady for a good 30 seconds, we were 100% at quality.
It's also one of the harder things to measure.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about that part too. Quality of hire means, something different, a little bit something different to each person, each recruiter or hiring manager. So, but it's really nice to see the audience putting quality first. So fantastic.
Absolutely. And, also depends on what you're recruiting for.
Yep.
So, speed makes sense, and sometimes a less expensive hire, makes
Yep.
more sense.
Alrighty. So AI and D&I, lots of eyes.
Lots of eyes. Well, AI, there's just so much out there about AI, and we haven't been able to use it quite yet. We're going to get to do that hopefully with the system we've got. And, furthermore, there's just so many startups out there that are all these, I've been introduced to probably 5 or 6 in the last year plus that do some sort of assessment that turns into AI that's going to help determine and identify the best candidates for us. I think there's some interest in that, but I'm not sure we're quite there yet. And the lucky thing is we're still small enough that we can rely on our people here. I think when you're in a much bigger organization, AI and assessments and things like that is great. I mean, it allows you to access all these students across all kinds of schools. And then that can intersect with diversity, but it really can just intersect with the needs that you have across the U.S., depending on what you're hiring for. And I think one of the other things that's on here, I know you guys put our core values down here, and that really speaks to who we are, and integrity and the respect that we have for the people that work here is so important, and that's really where the diversity initiatives come in and how they're successful. I know I talked about that earlier, but
Right.
you have to have that buy-in. Otherwise, it's just, you're just going to go in circles.
Right. It's like core values. I think there was years where we just kind of etched them on the wall, painted them on the wall, put them on the back of our business cards, etc. And I think people are now really starting to kind of hire and fire and promote to their values. So they're using it as a test. Like, do you have these things? That get you in? Great. Are you excellent at these things? That gets you promoted. Okay. Did you violate these things? Okay. That gets you out of here. And I think, again, and if that is your firm, if that's fair representation, I kind of look at values as things that, maybe every 18 months you need to reevaluate and say, is it still us? Have we changed? Good, not good, bad, that's okay, but just do our values still represent who we are? And I used to when I ran an ad agency, I would do this test where I would say, okay, we're setting up an office on the moon. you're going to send 3 people to represent the firm. Who are the 3 people, and give us an example of how they emulated the values, and why would you choose them? And it's just kind of an interesting test or a way to kind of look at how one goes about making sure that they don't drift too far from their values.
I think that's right. Some of the things that I hear, I mean, I'm lucky our senior managers come and speak to our candidates a lot, and what they reiterate over and over again is just how much they believe in the integrity and excellence of the people that come in here, and that also speaks to the work that goes out, right? Whether you're producing something that's a physical product or not, you need it to be the best that it is, because otherwise you lose your clients, and they're not going to come back, and then that's problematic for the business. So you do need to make sure all these people are kind of on board with what the company, their values are.
That's right. And I think this is more of a kind of an 80s and 90s thing, is we developed these values and then we didn't emulate them. Like they were just words.
That's right.
It was usually the executives. Let's just kind of call it. They didn't fall in line. Like these were just words that they thought everyone needed to hear these words, but they didn't really exude those values. And I think now, especially in today's world, we're a little bit more transparent, where if you don't exude those values, it's like, well, there's kind of ramifications for that. So let's look at the next slide, if you don't mind. Good. We've got about 6 minutes left. First thing, Joanna, I want to ask, while the audience is throwing some questions into the question box, is advice you'd give yourself 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Use it any year. Like, what would you go back if you could? You've had this dream or nightmare, whatever. What would you go back and tell yourself about recruiting and about HR?
It's funny. I always liked the idea of HR and recruiting, but no one in my family ever did that. I mean, we were either in education or business, and so I wasn't quote unquote educated enough to realize that I could be a recruiter. And I kind of was always drawn into trying to do that, and I wish I just sort of not waited so long to figure that out. I definitely had some fun in my 20s, and like I said, I did outdoor education and got to do some really cool jobs that are great for conversation with candidates, and certainly taught me how to juggle a lot of different things when you have variables you can't deal with, and you can't fight nature, just like you can't deal, there are lots of variables when it comes to dealing with humans. So I think what I wish is that I had started doing this earlier, that I would just tell myself that you got to trust your own instincts, which is what I tell candidates. And I probably didn't do that right away, but you know what's right for you. And that's the most important part.
The people that work around you and with you, what's kind of the best people that really kind of work best around you? And I'll give you an example myself. I like contrarians.
Okay.
So I'm one of those guys. I actually like people that when I say something, they go, yeah, you're full of, whatever. And here's why, this, and this, with logic and reasoning. So I like people to push me. And people that don't push me don't fare well around me, because I want to be constantly pushed by somebody, which is kind of weird. Another weird offset of that is I don't really like positive feedback. So again, odd, right? Yeah, I know. Anyone that gives me positive feedback, I automatically discount them. Like I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm good. I don't need positive feedback. Zero validation. I don't like anything unsolicited. If I didn't ask you for advice, don't give me advice. I'm not listening. In fact, even if it's great advice, I'm still not listening. I thrive with solicited negative feedback.
Interesting.
That's where I thrive. When I go to you or somebody else and say, okay, what did I mess up? You don't have to tell me, oh no, you were great at this, this, and that. I'm not listening. B,
Right.
I'm taking away IQ points from you. So don't tell me what I did great, because I already know what I did great. With that,
I mean, the thought of asking for unsolicited negative feedback is like making my stomach turn. You're a brave guy.
Well, no, deeply flawed actually. So what around you on those things? And I really wanted to give you, as using myself as an example, give you some time to think about it. Like, who works well around you?
I like to work relatively autonomously, and why I say that is that I expect a lot of trust in me to do my job, and I like to instill that the people that work with me, that I trust that the people on the recruiting team are going to do what they need to do, and obviously they know I'm very approachable for questions. I always like to kind of kick at ideas. We're a relatively creative bunch. I do like kind of talking through different types of ideas to see if something will work differently the next time we try it. So that's that autonomous part, is I want them to go out and see what works for them, and come back and say this didn't work or this did work, or I want to try it a different way. And I'm sort of that same way. I just want to instill trust in other people. I don't love the feeling of somebody hovering around me. That drives me nuts. I'm the youngest in my family, so I feel like I had to speak up, kind of had some sharp elbows for it to be heard. And so I expect that they're going to give me my space to do what I want to do.
Well, what's great, what I love about what you've said is you're fairly independent. You thrive in that environment, because you like the trust and the ability. You're accessible. So it's not that you're just independent and you're off and you're not accessible. That's different. You're accessible and you want other people to kind of play ball the same way or similar way. Like, go be independent. I'm not, unless you need me. I don't need to be, emailing you every day or texting you every 5 minutes asking you about a bid. When you need me, ring my bell.
Right.
That's cool. And you're accessible. I like that. When you hire for folks around you, do you ask them questions like that, or do you get to that stuff, that kind of work style issues stuff?
I usually ask them things like, if I were going to ask your manager right now a couple positive and maybe areas of improvement, what would they say? Or, how do you like to work? Like, what's the best way to manage you? Because I do think those are important things that come out in the interviews, and hopefully the person is being truthful. And
Right.
I don't think anybody's asking for a micromanager, so I think that's
I like people that just kind of stand over my shoulder and
right.
tell me what to do. They leave lists like in posted form all over my desk of things I have to do. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
I mean, I think people tend to come out and just say, I'm new at this, so I want to be able to ask a lot of questions. Okay, well then that's totally being honest. You just need people to be authentic around you, and recruiters sort of have that sense of figuring that out.
We'll wait for that gal or guy that says that they want solicited negative feedback.
Yeah. I might think twice about that.
Yeah, you should. You should run away. All right, we're out of time. I want to thank the good folks at Olio. Clearly, I want to also thank Joanna for taking us into her world and taking us through her journey. It's been fantastic. Thank you, Joanna, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Olio, and everyone have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much. This is great.